Hi, Mia. Thank you so much for joining me today to celebrate the Fragrance Foundation's International Women's Day. When did your love for fragrance first start?
Oh, great question, Amy. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's exciting to be doing this with you. So, when did my love of fragrance first start? I think it's fair to say that it started from a really, really young age. I was one of those kids that was perpetually holding things right up against my nose to smell. I was particularly fond of perfumes.
Yeah.
I understood them then. I wasn't quite educated enough to understand that they could be called fragrances or juices. But definitely any perfumes that, thinking back on it, actually the females in my family wore. I had two quite glamorous grandmothers. My mother was also pretty glamorous. And their fragrances, I loved it when they were going out for dinner and you would then get that special occasion smell,
Yeah, definitely. And also the kind of the lipstick smell that kind of went with that.
Yeah. And there are definitely fragrances that then take me back to those moments.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's lovely. And how do you feel like that's, in terms of your career, helped shape it?
Well, my mum, as this glamorous lady that I've just described, she used to work in beauty. So that was she had a career in beauty, I guess.
Wow.
So in the sense of knowing that beauty offered an opportunity to build and have a career, I guess I understood that from quite an early age. And she worked in an independent perfumery in Oslo, in Norway. So it was through her and all of her friends and her colleagues and whatnot that I understood that you could have also different types of a career, because one of her friends was the owner of the store, and she had a load of friends that were estheticians and beauty therapists and all of this stuff. So I definitely had that sense from quite a young age, albeit I don't think I had ever necessarily at that point imagined that I would have a career in beauty. I mean, don't get me wrong, I was the first to volunteer to stand behind the counter and be like, "Hiya, can I help you today?"
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, on seeing a 7-year-old behind the counter, were a bit like, okay.
Yeah. That's really interesting, actually, Mia, because it's exactly the same for me, because obviously my mum has been in the industry since, I'm not going to say when because I'll get in loads of trouble, but a long time. And that whole, her used to going off to work in her suits with her fragrance, and it's really kind of nostalgic for me as well. And even now there's certain fragrances I think that remind that that lipstick fragrance kind of smell. It just always really reminds me of Shelley, my mum. And I used to go to work with mum when she was at her Calvin Klein days, and during the Christmas break every year, and I would make her buy me a suit.
Oh, stop.
To match her, just so I could kind of
stop.
And I'd go and work in all the different, well, I say work, but used to go and kind of work in all the different departments, and I was only 9 years old, and I used to love it. And I feel like that's definitely kind of, for me, where my love of it all started. And then I went on to do my work experience when I was at school with Calvin Klein, and I remember they sent me out on it was to do kind of reports. I think it was when they were launching colour, to look at other brands and what they were doing. And I remember
that's a great project.
I know, and I have my little checklist, and I felt so kind of important. Yeah, and how was the MAC foundation, and how is it, and I absolutely loved it. It was such an amazing experience, and I think we're lucky that we have mums that are in the industry, actually.
Yeah, I agree.
That we've both kind of followed in their footsteps.
I know, right? I know. And I don't know if your mum felt the same, Amy, but well, maybe not, given that she was, like giving you all of these amazing work experience opportunities and stuff. But I don't think my mum necessarily thought that I would follow in her footsteps. So now that I have, exactly as you say, and actually my brother has done the same, but for my granddad. She gets very nostalgic about that. And I think for her, it is kind of like carrying this baton of, I don't know, like stuff that apparently our family does.
Yeah, definitely. And it's, sorry.
You go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask you, so given that your mum was in the industry, given that you did all of this work experience, did you feel like a career in beauty was inevitable for you?
Yes. Do you know, I've always been really, really creative, and that's kind of one of my strong points. And when I left college, I went on I was a visual merchandiser for Topshop.
Yeah,
absolutely loved that. And obviously that's kind of fashion, but that whole kind of getting to be really creative and dressing in windows and dressing in mannequins, but also kind of taught me a lot about, I used to look at the reports. Okay, what are the best sellers? We've got to move those to the front this week. And that was such a great kind of learning curve. And then when Shelley started SAS, I joined and kind of started as an area sales manager, actually, which again was super interesting because I could see kind of what the needs were at store level. I travelled around Ireland all the time to kind of, different retailers, a good view of the landscape, I suppose.
Yeah.
And then I moved into marketing, and actually, the kind of creativity side of it, I absolutely loved it. And I think with fragrance, there are so many stories that can be told, and that can kind of come through from a trade perspective as well. You can be so creative and have so much fun with it. So it fit, and I love it. So.
And is there anything that you're doing now that you didn't think that you would ever end up doing?
That is a good
surprising parts of your job.
That is a good question.
I'll let you think about that for a minute.
Yeah, I think the kind, business plans and things like that. I don't think I could. I think that's probably where I would never have seen myself doing that, because I've always been so creative. But I've learned that along the way, and I'm really lucky to have had amazing mentors to kind of really guide me with that kind of side of things. So that's probably the one thing. If you'd asked me 20 years ago, I would say I wouldn't be doing. But yeah. And for you, what is the kind of, I guess, what's your experience in the fragrance industry like, in terms of how it supports kind of you and what you've done, your ambitions, your growth?
So I think that the fragrance industry, and actually I'd go beyond that and say like the beauty industry as a whole, is overall a very supportive industry. Like, that's definitely been my experience, that versus some other industries that I worked in previous, or, in between, I suppose, I've certainly found the beauty and the fragrance industry to be the most supportive, the most nurturing. And I think, don't get me wrong, stuff like Fragrance Foundation is a massive part of what helps foster that feeling and foster that environment. Because I definitely think that, the events that you attend, I certainly feel that when you attend those things, it is like you're greeting friends, it's you're reconnecting with friends as much as, like business partners, and as much as colleagues, that there is this real sense of like humanity, I feel, in the fragrance industry. And maybe I think if you were going to get like quite profound about it, I think you could probably link that back to fragrance itself, and that it is like, I mean, smell is one of our senses, right? Like we can't help that. And I think, you know, many of us have attended the Gorgeous Rogers trainings to understand that actually the feelings that it elicits, like they are feelings. It's just this very like primitive and primal reaction and response that you have to certain fragrances. So I think maybe because of that, it implicitly then holds a kind of special place in our hearts. And maybe because we kind of then, as an industry, understand the importance of what it is that we're putting out there. And exactly as you said, Amy, like the stories that we're telling to consumers, I think maybe that helps to bring some of this humanity, because ultimately we work alongside it and with it every day.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like it's a mood enhancer, you know, kind of going on from what you're saying. It is a mood enhancer. You know, you might spray, I'm very kind of, I'll spray a fragrance depending on my mood. You know, if I feel like I need a hug, it will be a really warm vanilla fragrance. If I need an uplift, it will be, you know, something really citrusy and fresh. And yeah, you're completely right. It is really, it's part of everyone, isn't it?
Yeah. And totally. And that you're applying it to your skin, and then implicitly it becomes also part of your skin. Like you can't help that. So no, I think it's a wonderful thing that this business creates, and that you know, these amazing creators offer to the world. And I honestly, I feel humbled that, you know, that I can play a role in that.
Yeah.
And and what about for you, Amy? I feel like, you know, you've got such I suppose a lot of like crossover with my interactions in terms of what I, you know, get involved in, and the brands that we work with and the way that we work with them. But do you feel the same about the fragrance industry? I guess I'm kind of intrigued whether that's just like a retailer thing, or whether it also is something that's felt on brand side.
No, definitely. You know, the fragrance industry, I think, is super supportive. And that, you know, like you mentioned, the Fragrance Foundation, all the courses that they do.
Yeah.
You know, the different events that happen.
Yeah.
You know, it's all about kind of, there's a lot about learning, which I think is great. You know, when we started Phoenix Beauty, the support that we had from our brand, you know, previous brand and retail partners was just incredible. And without that, I don't think we would be where we are today. So that's, you know, it's a very supportive industry, and it's a really small industry, and, you know, everyone kind of knows everyone. And, you know, like you said, it's very artistic, and which is just fab.
Yeah. And I think you're so right, Amy, that there's a big part that's about learning. And I guess particularly when you think about a lot of the work that the Fragrance Foundation does, but I guess ultimately about education, right?
Yeah.
And that, I feel like, is oftentimes something that transcends just the, let's say, the industry workforce, and also something that gets paid forward to customers as well. And through things that you've already mentioned, like the storytelling and everything that manifests and that they encounter on counter. Yeah,
definitely. Definitely. And
sorry, go ahead. I might ask you another question, if that's okay, Amy. So is there an aspect, knowing that obviously the universe that you in your role and that you as Phoenix Beauty touch is really broad, I'm curious to know, are there any aspects of the fragrance industry that you would be curious to discover more about or learn more about, maybe that isn't part of your universe today, that you're actually really intrigued to know and understand more?
Yes. I definitely think sustainability is quite a big, subject, and something that's really, really important. I think we could, as an industry, maybe learn, more ways to kind of tackle that, in terms of, packaging, recycled packaging, alternatives for cellophane, kind of small things like that, making sure that raw materials are sustainably sourced and all of that kind of thing. And it kind of brings me on to another point, because obviously what we do is very much trade marketing side. So, we work with our brand partners and, launch brands in the UK market and manage brands in the UK market. But I feel like it would be really interesting to look at the production side of things and the new product development. That would be something really interesting to explore, and taking on board those kind of sustainability elements. Because I do feel there are some brands that are doing amazingly well when it comes to sustainability, but I do feel like it can be taken a step further.
Yeah. And I mean, it's exactly as you say, like, as a subject, there isn't really a part of either our lives or our businesses that it's not relevant to, is there?
No.
And I agree. I think that, there are massive strides being made. There are also small steps being made. But I think what really excites me is that it's progress.
Yeah.
And sure. I think that, it is something that we're all, as more innovations are made, particularly exactly as you say, Amy, like around packaging, around sourcing of ingredients, harvesting ingredients, all of the processes pertaining to how these products are brought to life and are birthed. It pertains to every single one of those elements, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So what are some of the most important things that you've learned about your work? How do you feel it's impacted you individually in a personal way?
I feel like that's a very full question. It's like 3 questions disguised as one question.
Time.
I think the most important thing I've learned about my work is the role, is, I suppose, distilling and crystallizing my thoughts about the role that beauty plays. And by beauty, I mean, yes, fragrance, yes, makeup, yes, skincare, yes, hair care, like everything that the beauty industry puts out, is the role that plays in people's lives and what it means.
Yeah.
And actually, quite frankly, why it's important.
Yeah.
Because and I do think that I probably had a more simplistic view of that before. I couldn't really put a time period on it, so I'm just going to say before. But now, and maybe also catalyzed through, I think, a lot of the soul searching and reflection and et cetera, that a lot of us did through COVID, when some of those things felt less meaningful, or maybe not less meaningful, but maybe less relevant.
Yeah.
I think that's probably one of the most important things that I have learned is the role that it plays in people's lives. Because it is a role for good, and it is a role that is enriching, and touches more elements of someone's life than it's probably even useful to mention now, because I think actually we all know them, right? And I think the other thing is that it's very individual to the individual. What it means for you, Amy, you mentioned that, like, when you feel like you want a little hug, then you put on a vanilla-based scent. that's certainly one way that it's meaningful and important and enriching. But, the armor that maybe we feel like we're wearing when we put a red lip on, or we cover our like breakout, or, whatever it is. Yeah. And I feel like actually maybe the examples I've just given then are probably too simplistic, but suffice to say that in my view, it is a exceptionally important role, and one that is, which might sound a bit too profound, but I think is fundamental to people's well-being. Yeah. And
you kind of feel like you look good and you mentally feel better.
Yeah. And I didn't realize, Amy, and that's why I kind of used the like COVID reference.
Yeah.
Because I think that maybe for a lot of us, there was a point where it was like, oh, thank goodness, I don't have to put a full face on in the morning. That's going to save me at least 15 minutes, et cetera, et cetera. And then actually over not so much time, you realized, that you were missing out on something. And it was a bit difficult to kind of put your finger on what exactly it felt like you were missing out on.
I think especially if you kind of every day, sort of person that kind of gets up, does your makeup, puts your face on. It is nice to have a break. You're right, but then you do feel like something's missing, and you almost feel like yourself anymore.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think also at that time when so much other stuff had been taken away from us, actually then it got to a point where you were quite keen to reinstate some of those things, at least, the little that you had control over, to bring some of those things back.
Yeah.
And I guess also in terms of what I've learned about myself, so this is also kind of like a pre and a post-COVID thing. I went through a bit of a renaissance during COVID. It has to be said.
Everyone did.
I know. And I also feel like as we've rolled into 2023, more people than those that I have known of for a long time have been very reflective again about COVID. It felt like through 2022, we kind of like stopped talking about it. And now it feels like, I don't know, maybe it's a new year. People are again in that reflective state of mind.
I think we had a year of kind of, okay, we actually now through it.
Yeah.
We've had a year of quiet because it was so up and down, wasn't it? Kind of, it's better and then it worse, better, worse. That
totally.
It was a whole year of, has this gone away? And I think that's probably what's making people look back and reflect.
Yeah. And I think you're right, Amy. Maybe in 2022, we were all kind of like holding our breath a little bit. And like, if we don't talk about it, it might not happen again. Yeah. Anyway, I think what I've learned about myself as an individual is that I get energy from people. And I think I had previously considered myself more introverted than that actually maybe I was a bit more of a like homebody. Listen, don't get me wrong. If my plans ever get cancelled, I oftentimes do a little happy dance to myself. But actually, I need people. I need conversations. I need to share ideas. I need to learn about them and their experiences and the vision that they have, what they're trying to, create and deliver. I need that more than I ever thought I did.
Oh, that's a really nice answer, Mia.
Thank you. I did think about it.
Yeah. That's a really nice answer. And I think you're right. And I guess COVID has played, not to keep talking about it, but has played even more of a role in that now, because there was such a lack of human interaction. And, throughout that whole period, the presentations on Zoom and meetings on Zoom.
Yeah.
Got to a point where I was like, I just want to sit in front of a retailer and present. I want to talk to them face to face. So I think you need that that human kind of reaction.
Definitely. And I think in beauty in particular, like there was a little piece of my heart that broke every time, as you say, Amy, you were in one of those like strategy meetings or marketing presentation on a screen. And then the question at the end was, and so what do you think? And it's like, but I feel like I've only had half an experience because I can't smell the story that you've just told me. Like, I believe in the story.
That's something that needs to be invented.
I mean, doesn't it just? Yeah. In as you were saying before, Amy, a sustainable way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Someone needs to invent that.
Yeah. But it was the same on makeup as well, right? You know, like ordinarily part of that, you know, education again, and your understanding of what it is that is being put out into the market is based on your own experience, your own trial and test of the product. Because we love nothing more than understanding what the color payoff is and how pigmented it is and how finely milled it is, etc., etc. And when you can't, it's kind of like, well, I believe everything that you're saying, but I do feel like I've missed out because I haven't experienced it myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, Amy, what are you most looking forward to upcoming in the fragrance industry?
Well, from our side, Phoenix, we have some incredible launches that we've got coming up, which is super exciting. You know, there's a new Billie Eilish.
I hadn't heard.
Which is really exciting, and a new Ellie Saab, a new pillar which is just launched, rolling out in March. So there's lots going on at Phoenix. But in terms of the industry, of course, the Fragrance Foundation Awards, very much looking forward to that. Always a highlight of the year from an industry kind of get together perspective. So, and I'm sure some fabulous brands will win. So yeah, very much look forward to that.
Are you speaking that into existence, Amy? Because I feel like there might be a few Phoenix Beauty nominations or submissions.
There are.
That have gone into that process. Fab.
There are, and obviously everything crossed. Who knows?
Oh, no, but you're right though. It's always a wonderful event. And I know that your brands always keep you exceptionally busy with all of the amazing things that they are creating and launching.
And how about for you, Mia? That's that question back at you.
Oh, I mean, there's 2023 is going to be a very exciting year. I think that there are new brands that are going to enter the space and I think be as disruptive as if not more so, as the brands that have preceded them. Don't get me wrong, 2022 was, you know, I mean, the beauty industry came out fighting in 2022. Yeah. Like you could see that there was all of this like pent up energy and creative energy, that whether it was in the products themselves or the activations that supported those products, it was an exceptional year. It really, really was. So I don't then say it lightly when I say that I think 2023 is going to be even more exciting than 2022. That's my prediction. I'm quite confident in my prediction.
Catch up at the end of the year.
Exactly. Yeah. We'll compare notes. Like, was it super exciting? Yeah. Did Phoenix Beauty clean up at the Fragrance Foundation Awards?
Well, you'll be there.
Yeah. So I'll be able to answer that question myself. And I'm intrigued, Amy, because you mentioned at the beginning that one of your memories was, you know, from childhood was of your mum getting ready for work in the morning and that like rosy lipstick scent.
Yeah.
Is there are there any other like fragrance memories, scent memories that stick out for you?
In terms of actual fragrance, I mean, my nan used to wear Estee Lauder Pleasures. So that kind of fragrance really, stands out in my mind. And whenever I smell it, I instantly think of her. And another one actually that's linked to my nan, really interestingly, when you kind of walk in somewhere and there's a certain aroma and it just instantly transports you to another place or memory.
Yeah.
So that really kind of like antique wood or
yes
that kind of smell. So whenever I walk in somewhere that has that kind of like antique wood smell, it instantly takes me back to my nan's house. I mean, she had like a Victorian townhouse in Dulwich, and it was all full of antiques, and there's just something about it, that kind of old wood smell. It just makes me feel like I'm back at her house.
Oh, so that's lovely.
Yeah, and obviously my wedding day fragrance.
Oh, what was your wedding day fragrance? Please share.
It was Parfum de Marly Delina.
Oh, nice choice.
So yeah, that obviously holds amazing, lovely memories. So
you were an early Delina adopter then?
I was an early Delina adopter. So we actually launched Delina at SAS and Company previously.
Yeah.
So I was always a massive fan. And it's just such a lovely, fruity, fresh, it's a gorgeous wedding scent, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's a gorgeous fragrance and is, like taking the world by storm, isn't it? So shall we say that you were like the OG for Delina? Yeah.
First one ever.
Influenced the world.
Yeah. And how about you? What are your scent memories?
Similarly, actually, Amy, my grandmother's fragrance is one that always elicits a really strong reaction from me. That strong reaction is usually in the form of like bawling my eyes out.
Yeah.
She wore Lanvin Arpège.
Yes.
Which in her later years was very tricky to get hold of. We did, however, sell it at Harrods, so it wasn't that tricky. So that's definitely that's still one that provokes, as I say, strong feelings. My mum, as your grandmother, wore a Lauder fragrance. She didn't wear Pleasures though. She wore Azuré.
Okay.
Yeah, and Azuré, we have an exceptional Azuré business at Harrods, actually. And I do, whenever I walk past that counter and it has been sprayed, my mother is standing next to me.
Yeah.
And I guess, as you mentioned, Amy, I think also ambient scents, it's scent in any form, isn't it?
Yeah.
And for me, the ambient scent that takes me transports me, let's put it like that, is the smell of baked goods, specifically those, including cinnamon and cardamom, which is basically what every bun in Norway and of course Scandinavia is made from. And when you walk into those bakeries, which usually double also as a cafe, so whenever I would hang out with my grandparents in Norway, always the day included a stop off at one of these cafes and a bun for me, a slice of cake for my grandma, etc. So whenever I step into one of those bakeries or anywhere that has those spices in it, I'm like, whoa, yeah.
It really does. When you smell a fragrance that it kind of stops you in your track, or taken instantly back to another memory or another time. It's funny.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I often find that it takes me a minute because it's it's almost a bit of an assault, like
Yeah.
it comes out of nowhere. And
Yeah.
you're like, hold on a second.
Well,
I just need to, I need to kind of like gather my thoughts for a moment.
Yeah.
Understand where that came from. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then hopefully style it out a bit. But I think oftentimes, particularly if l'envant arpège is involved, there's no styling it out. I just need to cry it out, really.
That's okay. Well, thank you.
And thank you.
It's been lovely to talk to you.
I know. I feel like we've had an all fragrance conversation.
Yes, we have.
And I've learned lots.
Yeah, I have as well. Stuff I did not know about you.
Same here. And I thought, going into this, I was like, there's nothing that Amy's going to say that I don't already know. How wrong I was. And
quite similar, actually.
Definitely. Yeah, that's actually very true. Very true indeed. Which is probably why we get on so well, Amy.
That is why. Okay, thank you very much, Mia, and have a wonderful rest of day.
Thanks so much for the opportunity and the chat, Amy.